Around 10 years ago, I wanted to craft 3D printed emblems for my company. I looked around locally and didn't find someone willing to do it for cheap. So I went on the popular Chinese website Alibaba. I put up an order and within weeks got beautiful 3D printed emblems. I couldn't wait to tell all my other entrepreneur friends about it, but this story has a twist ending. A year later, I tried to do the same thing but for custom-made headphones. And then what happened? I got scammed. Basically, using Alibaba or AliExpress is like tossing a coin. There's a 50% chance that you're going to get stuff done at a cheaper price than the Indian market, and there's another 50% chance that you'll probably get scammed. Hey guys, I'm Varun Mayya. You would have seen me on Aevy TV. Today I'm here on Groww with a series called Groww Explained. Here we will discuss interesting case studies on diverse topics around finance, business and economics. These videos will be on English, and I can promise you one thing. This is going to be different from what you have been watching on this channel so far. So if you are in for a fun and interactive learning experience, this series is for you. Without any further ado, let's continue with the first video in the series. Today, India has matured to the point where I do not need to look outside. But it wasn't always so. In 1975, it was an open question as to which nation, India or China, would win in an industry production race. Unfortunately, it was China that won. Between 1995 and 2018, China's industry output grew 6 times faster than India's. India exported more than $323 billion worth of goods in 2018. Meanwhile, China exported goods valued at nearly 8 times that number. China's top exports included products such as electrical machinery, appliances, and equipment, whereas India until 2018 was known for manufacturing less sophisticated parts. But 2 years later, 3 things changed. 3 very important things. Number 1, India's own imports have always heavily depended on China. India's imports from China in January to August 2022 were $70.7 billion, a growth of 23.6% since last year. 65% of India's imports from China is limited to 3 product groups: electronics, which is a 30% share, machinery, which is a 20% share, and inorganic chemicals, which is about 15% share. But China, on the other hand, was strategically buying less. Look at this irony. Iron ore exports for the same period were down by 73% from China. That's not a small number. Why are India's imports growing despite China reducing spending on us? The reason is we are critically dependent on China for articles of everyday use as well as for industrial products such as mobile phones, laptops, solar cell modules, ICs, and more. Lithium-ion batteries, which are used in almost all phones in India, these imports surged more than 100% during January to August 2022, year on year. Once electric vehicles come into play, and at some point in India, even with our bad roads, they will, this import value will increase. And this brings me to my first big change that is going to start showing impact in the next year or 2. You see, there have been several calls to shun Chinese products after a border clash with China in 2020, in which 20 Indian soldiers were killed. Following the event, India imposed a ban on 59 apps, including TikTok, UC browser, and many others. Almost all these apps have some preferential Chinese interest, and the majority have Chinese parent companies. But this doesn't matter too much to imports because, as we've learned, major imports are not apps but electronics. But in August, the Indian government sought to restrict Chinese companies from selling smartphones cheaper than 12,000 rupees in this country. This will have a massive impact on electronics import because this is where we are most dependent on China, as I've shown you before. The second big change was COVID. As high as 57.7% of Chinese manufacturing companies reported lack of demand when COVID happened. Both industrial output and retail sales fell hard. In March 2022, there was a COVID resurgence. The wave came back that shut down a lot of the progress that China had made since the first wave. The thing is, China had suddenly become very strict on COVID. After seeing the impact the first wave had created, China decided to double down on its zero COVID policy. That's right, China went back into lockdown and made all the importers in other countries worry, what is happening to my imports? This repeated process of going to lockdown again and again and again, hitting industrial production hard, it was also shaking the confidence of people who were importing from them, including the confidence of Europe. The third point is that there's actually a China and United States trade war that is ongoing. It's an economic conflict between the People's Republic of China and the US of A. In January 2018, US President Donald Trump began setting tariffs and other trade barriers on China. He said that there were unfair practices and that China was stealing intellectual property. He argued that the US trade deficit was a burden and that tariffs would help promote domestic manufacturing that would keep the United States from being ripped off by China. And I've seen this a lot, right? This happens to us as well. If you come up with an innovative product in India, a Chinese knockoff will appear on Alibaba in a few months for 1/5 the price. And that is what China's manufacturing industry has been doing for years, and that also increases their margin, allows them to sell it lower because they're doing absolutely no research and development. There's no innovation. They are simply copying. About $370 billion of Chinese goods bound for the US was slapped with tariffs. The US imports from China fell by $87.3 billion year on year. This is the largest annual decline in US imports from any trade partner, excluding 2009 financial crisis. This didn't just stop at Trump. Biden, who came into power, also did not remove the tariffs. China also got pissed off and started hitting back by doing things like blocking American books. So the US created a financial divide, and China's hitting back with a cultural divide. Let's see how that plays out, but this is India's opportunity. So imagine the flow of the economy of Chinese exports as a tap. With these three things that happened, as well as movements like Make in India and Make America Great Again, the tap suddenly has a block. What happens when the tap has a block? The water, which is anyway open, it has to go from one place to another, it flows backwards, leading to a manufacturing boom in countries like India and the birth of actual profitable unicorns here like Zetwork. And if you visit Tamil Nadu today, you will see a gigantic 550 section plot. New manufacturing plants with sunlight powered chargers on their rooftops are to be found. And as indicated by reports, Tata is now making parts for the latest iPhones on behalf of Apple. At long last, integrating India with the most exceptional production network on the planet, which was already associated to China. And with its entry into semiconductors, Tata is moving away from catering for the world and setting sights on its home market of India. And it's not just China. Asia in its entirety is seeing manufacturing outsourcing shift from Taiwan and Japan all the way back to India. This isn't just a China to India shift. And this is a big learning for me. These macro level political statements, I always thought they were, rubbish. But I've realized over time that these lines like Make America Great Again or Make in India are so powerful. They signal an idea, and that idea has far-reaching consequences that could even destroy another nation. Now let's come back to the scenario in India. All of this new demand, with the tap water flowing back and with the US needing a manufacturing ally to replace China, led us to being in the spotlight. Now there's one more macro level advantage in India. Look at this chart. India is the cheapest place in the world to hire manufacturing talent and laborers. And no, they're not being screwed just because they're being paid less. As we've spoken about before, the purchasing power parity is best in India. A meal in McDonald's, for example, costs 36% more in China, and consumer prices cost 64% more in China than in India. Rent, for example, is 242% more in China. So being in India, you get the same benefits and are hence paid lower prices because you can afford the same things. The problem with China now is the same problem that the West has faced. People in China today want to live more comfortable lives, work less, earn more. This is the reason why the labor cost in China is going up, and China is now colonizing Africa for cheap labor. India, on the other hand, is filled with people who just want to work and earn. They don't care how much, they don't care if they have to put in a little bit of effort. What we crave for is employment, which in turn lowers the labor cost, and India therefore becomes cheaper than China for labor required work. Unlike what Twitter believes, working and making money is absolutely not a bad thing. As long as you don't treat the employees badly, it is completely fine to give them employment. Don't get into that mindset that we should be given everything for free. USA tried that and it led to massive inflation that we in India are still struggling with because of them. In terms of which sectors India is growing the fastest in manufacturing, the sectors of pharmaceuticals, automobiles, electronics, textiles and food processing have been showing significant growth in recent years. Over the last 3 to 5 years, India's exports have been growing steadily with a particular emphasis on technology-driven products such as software and IT services. Additionally, India has also been expanding its exports in sectors such as pharmaceuticals, textiles, and agro-based products. The Indian government's production-linked incentive schemes have had a significant boost on the country's manufacturing sector. The PLI schemes have led to an increased investment in production, creating job opportunities and contributing to the country's economic growth. According to data from the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, the PLI scheme for the 10 key sectors has received investment commitments worth over 1.97 lakh crore. Telecom equipment makers have produced more than 6,200 crores worth of investments, with close to 247 crores since the launch of the PLI. The government and private sector have been launching initiatives aimed at promoting and supporting the growth of these sectors. For example, the Indian government has launched the National Policy on Electronics to promote the electronics sector and create a competitive environment for domestic companies. India's climb in the global manufacturing sector could be harmful for China, as it may lead to plant relocations from China to other parts of Asia, including India, particularly in pharmaceuticals, chemicals, and engineering sectors that continue to be the focus of US-China trade tensions. China, however, remains the top manufacturing leader and is diversifying its manufacturing base by moving up the value chain, especially in telecom, high-tech, and computers. The working age population in India is also growing, with a large proportion of the population being under the age of 35. This demographic trend presents a significant opportunity for the manufacturing sector to tap into the pool of available talent and increase production. Finally, India has been making steady progress in improving its rankings in the global business environment. In the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business report, India has consistently ranked higher in recent years, reflecting the country's efforts to create a more favorable business environment for domestic and foreign companies. And finally, we try being as unbiased as possible. And there's one thing that China still does better and that we should learn from. In fact, the Zetwork co-founder told me this. China for a long time was known as a copy-paste center. But if you look at their research and development spending, 25 years ago, it was just 2%. And that's why they were copying other countries. But 5 years ago, it has gone up to 27%. Ours went from 1.8% to 2.9% in the same period. Research and development is like gambling. You don't know what will come out of it. But when something good does come out, it changes the world. China today is making more innovative bets like AI and robotics, which we still are not. This is our opportunity. We are now starting to edge out China, and it's our responsibility to continue beating them by also focusing on R&D.
Investment in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing. Please read the risk disclosure documents carefully before investing in equity shares, derivatives, mutual fund, and/or other instruments traded on the stock exchanges.